Now we want to say something about the history of team expansion. We're more than 30 years old, so there's a lot of history to tell. But what we want to do is try to boil it down and encapsulate it in kind of a thumbnail sketch. We started in 1978, and we started as a prayer movement, and it was on the campus of a Bible college. So it was a real student kind of thing. It kind of reminds me of the student volunteer movement that you might have heard about. Remember, they met, I think 3 guys met under a haystack, and they prayed that God would use them, and they were just students at the time. They were probably 20 years old. The word is that after they infected all their friends with this zeal they had, that it multiplied, and by the time they were done, there were about 100,000, I think, students that had maybe mobilized for the field, and that was a great outcome for them to have. And in a way, it reminds me of, I would never presume to think we were that kind of monumental, epic proportions, but the principle is the same. Just 8 of us gathered in one dorm room, and we prayed that God would be able to use us to get started in this one little nation of Uruguay, South America. And we prayed, could this multiply to other countries after that? And from those very humble beginnings, we went to South America in 1982, and I served as the first team leader there in Uruguay, and God raised up another team leader on our team. I was able to come back in 1983 and start what we might call international services. And international services basically is the wing of team expansion that you might sort of think of as the home team, and then those teams that are in those lands far away would be considered the away teams, you could say. So that was a landmark year for us. In 1984, we started basing on another Bible college where I was able to do my grad degree somewhat earlier. So once again, there was a real student orientation, and God used that to raise up a bunch of students. In fact, at one of our meetings, there were probably 100 or 105 students, I remember, that were interested in mission. So it just kind of grew like a flame. In 1986, we started to open up works like the now very successful work in Caracas, Venezuela. That started in 86 in the summer, and it's been one of our most fun works to see happen. There are churches there now that would be the equivalent of nearly a mega church just in and of themselves, and the church has raised up now, I don't know, there must be 1,500 believers, and they've raised up from within their church people to go serve as missionaries with other team expansion teams in other parts of the world. So it's a real fun story. By the time we get to 1991, there had been work started in not only South America, but in Europe and Africa and Asia. In 91, the very interesting work in the Ukraine started. We moved, my wife and I, together with a team of about, I guess, 34 others, moved to what was then the USSR. And I guess people tell us we were maybe the first people to actually live in the USSR to do mission work. It was a kind of a very upheaval sort of time in the history of the USSR. Yeltsin up there on the tank in Moscow, Gorbachev kidnapped. I remember getting up one morning and seeing on the television this committee that had taken over. They said Gorbachev was sick, but everybody knew they had kidnapped him. Out of that whole summer of 91 and the months that followed came the very successful work in Kherson, Ukraine. And again, the Kherson, Ukraine church has grown to be over 1,000 people. They have their own ministry staff. Missionaries that worked with team expansion there were able to leave by 96, 97, having left behind a ministry staff totally on its own with their own dollars and their own building. They've also sent missionaries to not only the Muslim people group next door, but to join team expansion teams in other countries as well. So a really fun work. By the time we get to 1997, we were invited down to Louisville. It was actually Southeast Christian Church, who had a bunch of Sunday school classes. They wanted to get mobilized into missions. They said, why don't you come down and join us? We'll help you get started. It worked out to be a very good time for us because the Bible college where we were located really needed to grow into our building where we were basing our offices. And we, meanwhile, we were growing, we had doubled in staff, and we needed more space, and they just didn't have any more to offer. So we moved to Louisville in 1997, set up in the equivalent of an old church house. And so that was kind of a watershed year for us. By the time we get to 2001, there were 199 missionaries with team expansion. And by the time you got to 2002, the word was that the accumulated number of people baptized was 8,000. And there were 110 churches that had been started. Now at the 2010 mark, it is said that there have now been over 40 different countries where we've entered. Over 250 churches have have been planted, over 10,000 people that have been baptized, and we have over 300 missionaries working around the world. One of the most important things to realize is that throughout all of it, the local church has really been important to us. It's like everything we do, we try to do it in partnership with the local church. We feel like that the local church is kind of God's way to relate to the world. And if we aren't working in partnership with a local church, we're really not into His heartbeat. Yes, we're an agency, but we actually are an agency that serves as a partner or a catalyst to facilitate the local church to do what we feel like God has really wanted it to do all along. So we focus a lot of what we do by partnering with local churches. Another thing that's real important to us are our team leaders. If we don't have great leadership, then we feel like that our teams won't really go forward. And another piece that's really important to us are great followers. When we say great followers, sometimes people think of a follower as being like a sheep that's kind of, some people describe sheep as being dumb. They kind of just stand around and wait to be told. When we say followers, we mean courageous followers that actually help make the leader better by the questions they ask and by the initiative they take to do things that maybe the leader hadn't thought of doing, that makes the whole team better. All of that is team expansion. It's all an important part of our history. So that's our history of team expansion nugget.